Hello everybody, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to another Woodworking Wisdom Workshops live. So what we're going to do today, we're going to look at some problems. What happens when we're turning a bowl quite happily and we then suddenly go through the bottom. I'm sure we've all been there. I certainly have. If you haven't been there, you're not pushing hard enough. You're not testing the boundaries, as it were, or you haven't been turning for very long. But it will come. The air will turn blue. There'll be a few extremities. Extremities, is that the right word? Swear words. So what we're going to do, first of all, we're going to look at the basics, how we can get over the problem. If you've watched any of these videos or any turning videos, I think by now you know that we can't put wood back on again. We can only take it off. So it's how we overcome the problem. What can we turn that piece into? Now, I know Jason, who's on cameras, and we got Craig on questions today, but Jason does every now and again do a batch of shades, so lamp shades, purposefully with a hole through the middle. So there's an option. Go on Google, have a look at ideas for lampshade making. That's one idea, of course. The only issue though with accidentally going through the bottom of a bowl and turning it into something like a lampshade is the shape. You've already done most of the bowl, and so it will be the shape that you intended it to be as a bowl. So that could be a bit of a problem. So what we'll do is look at keeping the bowls as bowls. So like I said, this is one that we've prepared earlier. Honestly, that was done intentionally. But like I say, accidents do happen. We all make mistakes. How can we rectify that? So again, if we look at one that I've already done for you, here is one that we've already plugged. But instead of just plugging a hole there, what you find if you just do this is you still have a very weak underside. It's not clean or anything like that. So instead of just doing something like this, it has an idea. Do an embellishment, create a feature out of that floor. So what we've done here is we've just elevated it onto its own base. Now that was purely done by, and we're going to have attempt a little bit of it in a moment, plugging the whole of that recess. I'm not a fan of recess hold points on the bottom. So basically these, I'm more at home with a foot and make that sacrificial so you can then reshape the foot afterwards. But if you plug the bottom, making sure that you've bedded right up to this surface, that then gives you the opportunity to create the foot from it. Now, if you remember when we reverse bowls, we put a little hole in the very center to bring the tailstock up and use a push plate. And that's how you can overcome the then reshaping of this foot. All you do, plug the bottom, grip that once the glue is dried to turn your inside, then between centers with your push plate here for you then to reshape that base. So that's quite a nice way of embellishment, of embellishing and creating a feature out of a floor, potential floor. You know, and that almost looks as though it's intended to be, you know? So just a way of overcoming. Why would you do that? If you think maybe that you've spent an awful lot of money on a bowl blank, here's another one that we're going to play with in a minute. Again, it's got a hole through the middle, quite a small hole in this one. But if you spent a lot of money on a bowl blank, and you can spend an awful lot of money, certainly in this country, we're looking at 15, 20, 30 pounds for a bowl blank of that size. It's a shame to throw it away. Any timber is a shame to throw away, but also it hurts when you throw something like that away. So how can we adapt these bowls? We're going to do something slightly different with that one in a moment. We're going to start off nice and simple, though. Like I say, just converting or creating one of these, or giving you the know-how. So before we do anything, we need to put this back on the chuck and just tidy up that central hole. We need to give us a somewhere to go with. If you've, for instance, gone through the bottom of the bowl and you're right up against the face of the jaws in here, then it would probably be worth using a set of button jaws or wood plates to hold the rim and come at it from the other side first. Because what we've got to do is just tidy this up. I don't want to be touching metal though when we do that. So let's just turn the lathe speed down to 0 first. There we are. That going. And I'm just going to use the side of a skew chisel just to give us a little bit of square profile to the inside. Let's get a little bit closer than that. I'm going to go to a smaller tool rest. That's quite a big tool rest to get in there. I want to get close up to the side of that hole. The side of a skew is perfect because it has quite a sharp top edge. So just tickle the side. There we are, just giving myself a little bit of a cleaner edge. So that's completely tidy now. We'll show the camera up here. So there's a little bit of burr on the back edge, but that's just fluff. You can just literally wipe that away with your finger or a bit of fine abrasive. But the hole now is a clean, tidy hole. Now, the simplest way out of this now, of course, is a little bit of between center work, create a plug with a little foot, same width or thickness as the material thickness here. And then just sand that in. That's a very quick and easy way. You could even put a decorated plug in if you use something like a decorating elf or something like that. Nice, quick, and simple. But let's do a sacrificial, not a sacrificial foot, a nice foot to go in the bottom. So basically, I'm going to create a little dowel that will fit inside what is my recess at the moment. So nice, relatively straightforward piece of turning. Okay, so I'm just changing a set of jaws. I want to go with a bigger set of jaws here. So I'm using what we call the A+ jaws. There we are. And I've got a piece of ash here. All I've done with this piece of ash, firstly, made sure that it was actually bigger than the inside diameter of this hole. Okay, that's got to create a plug that I can fit inside it. If we start off too small, then we're losing right at the beginning. So this is a piece of ash. I've got side grain here, so end grain here. So this is up the length of the piece of timber, and I've taken the corners off just for ease, really. Going to hold that in the jaws. I don't need to turn that down to a cylinder before I put it in the jaws because I'm going to rough it right down anyway. Lay speed back to 0. Turn the machine on. We're going to go with let's go with a 1/4 inch gouge, so a 6mm bowl gouge. Just clean the surface first. Now, the area that's going into the bowl is this surface I'm working on now. So you've got to think also about your contact area. Does this area here, or is this area here flat? Is it slightly dished? Is it slightly raised? So we've got to think about that. I can see already it's fairly flat, maybe slightly dished that way, which would be right if it was me that turned it, which it was. I tend to put a very slight convex on most of these recesses if I do one. Again, if you do a concave recess, and I've done one on this one purposely, if you do a concave on it, you're more likely to go through the bottom when you're taking the inside of the bowl out, of course. So that's the reasoning behind it. We're going to talk about bowl shape as well in a moment, because it's quite important if you're going to do a recess for your bowl. It's quite important that you put a recess, you elevate a recess up. Same issue. If you don't, in this case it's flat. On the other bowl there, it literally is just the convex straight into my recess. If I do that, the chances of going through that recess are so much higher, especially if I follow the outside curve of the bowl. So if you elevate your recess up onto its own little foot, then you certainly will help eliminate that. So we're going to match that size, hopefully. So I'll get the size going first. Let's just make sure that's nice and true. Just drag cutting at the moment. I will get the skew chisel back in here as well in a second. Tool rest around a little bit. We're just going to start cutting the shape and size. Right, I'm going to start checking for size now. I don't want to go too small. So set of calipers, we'll just check the outside diameter of the hole that we've got here, just roughly. We've got quite a bit to take away. And you can't check enough. Always check and double check. You know, if you check too much, nothing's going to happen. If you don't check enough, you'll end up going too small and going right through the bottom. Yes, Craig. First question.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I've got a message from, or a question from Trevor for you, Colwin. Are the A+ jaws the same as the old Glenn Lucas 100mm dovetail jaws?
Yep, they are exactly the same, just a different name. There we are. We have a fit. Now, this is a little demonstrator's trick. When you're doing spigots like this, don't do them square, do them tapered, because then if it starts to bite up, you know you're almost there. If you do a square plug to start with, you may not get it right first time, and then you're going to be in a problem of having to take that plug away and restart. That's better. Now, you can see there already we're getting that nice grip. What I wanted to do, though, is make sure that it's very slightly convex here. Oh, sorry, concave here, just to accommodate this slight convex. So what we'll do is get the old skew out. And just a very slight just tidy up. Right, that should be it. Double check again. That's a nice fit. So what we'll do, we'll part that off, we'll glue that up, and then we'll see if that'll be ready to turn when we finish the next part. So I'm going to just part this off. I only need it to be about 1/2 inch, 12 mil thick. So let's get with our parting tool. So you notice what we've done there is we've gone down, rather than going down in one cut with the parting tool, because these have got quite steep sidewalls here, or deep sidewalls, we've done about 1.5 widths. And the reason we've done that is otherwise it'll bind up, it'll start burning, and then you'll get a grab. Yes, Craig?
Just one quick question from Warren. Which skew was that?
I'm amazed you asked, Warren. I think you would have known my answer. The Colwin Way signature skew. just for those that didn't know, there it is. And that was the middle size. Thank you for asking, Warren. Okay, so there's our foot. Oh, upside down, sorry. What I'm going to do here, because for speed, I would normally go now with a PVA, a wood glue. What I want to be able to do is turn this for you before we finish. So I'm going to go with a very, very quick super glue and hold this between centers when we finish. So I'm going to scuff this surface up. I don't want to have that finish preventing the glue from adhering to the timber. So just a little bit of tidying up here. Take some of that that finish off back to the real wood. But you won't have to rush. You'll be able to leave this overnight. There we are. While we're there, we'll just clean that edge up. Not that we're going to need to, because we're going to turn it again in a moment. There we are. Nice little bit of glue. Don't skimp on the glue. This is the medium TITEBOND CA glue. And what we'll do, we'll spray the surface of our plug with an accelerator. You're going to stand back. This reacts quite aggressively to each other. So I'm going to position the grain running against the grain of this first bowl. We're going to put it on, press it in, and that is drying nicely now. Okay, just to create a contrast. There's no point in trying to hide what you're doing. You know, everybody will see, even if it's the same timber, you'll see that difference in the timbers. So don't try and hide it. Make it, really emphasize it so that it looks sort of almost intentional. Different color timber, for instance, would be good. Or a feature bit of timber, a bit of burr, a bit of striking timber. So we're going to leave that, put it to one side. But now I've got somewhere to hold whilst I clean the inside of the bowl out. Once I've cleaned the inside of the bowl out, we'll go with the push plate method, hold between centers, and just create that little feature foot. Okay, quite a nice, neat way of doing your bowls that way. Whilst that's drying, like I say, let's just crack on with the next one. And this was a particularly nice piece of elm. This got a lovely, well, it's going to be a fruit bowl actually, and it's got a bit of lemon oil on. It's got a lovely smell to this oil. Lemon oil and fruit bowls go together, obviously, because of the citric acid in it. But the purpose of doing this one, what I wanted to do was show you the reasons that we avoid doing recesses. Several problems, actually. We've got a recess, but we've got a concave recess, and we haven't elevated that recess. We've gone straight into the bowl shape. All those problems coupled together mean that when you start trying to match the outside curve with your inside curve, you will go through the bottom. It's really, really likely. There's an awful lot of timber to take away here yet, and we've still gone through. The other issue, if we can go to camera 1 a second, Jace. The other issue, if you look at the diagrams that we've got here, so this is our recess, okay? Imagine going through, you know, you're trying to copy the shape here, and so I'm coming through, the thickness is staying the same. Look how close we get here. What a lot of people do, if you're starting, if we say that's all solid timber, when you're starting a bowl, the way we start is in the center and we cut down. So we do a little cut that way. Then we do a second cut. But you only want to get down to about half the depth of the bowl before you stop, 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 and get that wall thickness right there first. If you've just started out in turning, what you tend to do is not stop at this halfway point. You come down, you come down, you come down, you come down. Before you get anywhere near this point, your cut has already traveled through and into the hollow, this area here. So, you know, it's those little things as a beginner that you don't know that's going to cause the problem half the time. So like I say, we usually start off by cutting it up to the outside and getting this wall thickness done first before we then start taking any more depth away. Let's rectify the problem though, or try and rectify the problem. We'll just take out our bit of waste wood. I've had to do this on turning courses, so beginner turning courses where we've had groups of 6. I've probably had to sort this out or create plugs or show people how to create plugs more times than any other problem in bowl turning. Once you get over the flute direction, you get over the bevel rubbing, then it's right knowing how far to go or matching curves in bowls. It is a problem, and it will happen to you sooner or later. Don't be ashamed of it. It will, you know, happens to the best of us. So let's just finish the bowl to start with. That's the key. Back's done. Don't have to worry about that. So I'm going to expand back into the recess, and we're going to just take that last little bit away. Normally when this does happen to you, it's always going to be on the last cut. You know what it's like. I'm going to take one more cut. I think I could go a little bit thinner and then bang. The best time for it to happen is if you're in front of lots of people, because that gives everybody a chance to have a bit of a giggle. Okay, so let's turn the lathe speed to 0, then turn it back on. We're going to skim that outside surface. And what I'm not going to do is, I'm not going to do too much sanding on this piece. I can sand it whenever. I'm just going to do the turning. I don't want to create too much dust today. So if I just take that away, we'll then create the next bit. And by the way, I'm already happy with the thickness here. That's already been checked. So all I need to do now is take this center bit out. Okay, so I'm just going to check for thickness here. So what we've got, this thickness, this first wall thickness is nice and even. I'm a little bit thicker here now, so I can afford to take a little bit more out, knowing that the hole's there already. So we can even up that thickness. Have a look. I just want to feel now to make sure we're not too... Yeah, see, now we're even. So that's quite a flat bottom, but the curve is blending into it nicely. We're nice and even there now. So let's clean up that hole next. So we're going to do the same thing. Just use the side of the skew. Now, I'm sure before someone asks the question, why aren't I using the Colwin way skew the signature skew to do this process. Good reason, because the signature skew has a really nice rolled edge, so you can slide along the tool rest nicely. It doesn't have that hard corner for scraping, so that's why that scraping corner there is a result of having a flat face on this edge. The signature skews don't have that. They have a nicely rounded edge to slide along the tool rest and make your planing cuts easier. Yes, Craig?
I have a question from Frederick. Do you have any problems with the wood moving? Remounted wood, he's found to be awkward at times.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a wood turner, we prefer generally wet timber or air dry timber. Kiln dry timber is the most stable when it's, well, if you keep it indoors, and the most stable, but it's horrible to turn. It's dry, it's dusty, and it's rock hard. We want air dried, less percentage dry, but turns beautifully. The result of that, though, you will get a bit of movement, either through moisture loss or just through taking all that that stress away from the center bowl, and then it's springing. So yeah, it can be. The best thing to do is complete the project the same day or night. Don't leave it overnight. Otherwise, it'll open up and close, open up and close. Yes, Craig?
Question from Hodgepodge. So what skew should we all buy?
Well, of course, you know what I'm going to say is the Colwin Way signature skew, because what we would do, we would overcome that style of cut, and I just come in from the side instead. And clean the hole up that way. Okay, so there is a way around it. I think I prefer personally using that side cut. You can use the skew, the parting tool at the same time. So there's the parting tool. Don't go crazy with that side scrape, but there we are. I'm going in, I'm using this part of the parting tool to do the same job. Cuts in the same way. If you have a beading and parting tool, sorry, Craig, I'll be right with you. Beading and parting tool, one of these square fellas here, then again use the side of that to side scrape. All of these tools will do that, but they do have to have that square edge.
Question from, who was it? Let me back up. Here we go. Question from Lawrence. Is jacaranda wood good for turning? If yes, is it good for bowl turning? Is it food safe?
I've never heard of it. I'm sorry.
All right.
Send
I'm gonna have a Google session. Hang on.
Yeah, send it in as an email. We could find out more.
Jacaranda is an Australian timber. Yes, it turns. It loves it to decorate. So yeah,
it'll turn. What about for food?
Bowls and food safe?
Yeah, most timbers are food safe.
I think there's a resounding yes from behind the camera. So yes, and it can turn. Okay, thank you. All right, for the minute. There we are. So look, we've cleaned that up. I'm not going to sand. I've already said that. I don't want to create too much dust. And I'll be honest with you, that's a bit of sanding to do in there. Okay, we've got quite a lot to do. So there we are. Nice clean finish. We're in the same situation. You could do what I've just done with the smaller bowl if you want. Okay, but we have essentially a holy bowl or a strainer, depending on what you want to use it for. Nice lampshade. If you wanted to make a lampshade, get the lamp wires and you can create a nice lampshade. If you're using LED lights, of course, you can't use normal halogen lights on wooden lampshades, but that is an option. Okay, we're going to do a raised bowl with this one. So I've prepped up a few pieces already. I've already created a base. So this is a little OG base. In the bottom of that base, we've got a little recess. Doesn't matter on the base, of course, because we've got all this timber in the way. I've drilled a hole already. And so what we're going to do, that's going to be a base. I'm going to create a stem now that's going to go into our holy bowl. Then we're going to create a nice little plug. I'm actually going to do it as a little knob so we can pick the bowl up from the top. And join them all together that way. So what we have to do now, and the reason I haven't done the stem before, is I wanted to make sure that the stem matched the hole. Okay, so that's where we are with this one. Okay, so let's get our tailstock on first of all, and we'll get all these dimensions matching. Once we've got everything fitting, then we can get a nice shape created. Again, I'm not going to do any sanding. We're just going to go through the turning. Okay, so I've got a piece of ash here. I've already centered up. I've used the marking gauge and I've centered up. So just a little bradawl mark. Both ends. We'll use, let's use a Pro Drive center. And I'll do the same in the tailstock. So we've got the 25 Pro Drive in one end. And then in the other, we've got a live Pro Drive 16mm. I can line them up. There we are. Okay, lathe speed to 0, turn the machine on, turn the lathe back up. It's a habit you get into. It is a really good, safe way of working as well, good working practice. Lathe speed to 0, we've got a new project, or size a blank on. Turn it down before you turn it back up. There we are, so rough and gouge. Let's go with regular 3/4 roughing. Yes, Craig. Another question.
Yeah, Greg has asked, it says, morning, from Canada. Do you know if there's any distributors for Axminster in Canada?
No, I don't know off the top of my head. Lily, would you be able to find out in the next few minutes? If not, if you want to pop that email or email us at Woodworking Wisdom, then we'll find out for you and come back. Okay, so I need to make 2 tenons. They look similar size, but I know they're not because one was drilled and one was just hand turned just a few minutes ago, as you saw. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this one first. We're going to make it fit our base, and then we'll work our way up through. I think that's easier if I do the bigger one first. If I make any mistakes, then I've always got the smaller hole to accommodate it. Not that we're going to make a mistake, of course. So let's get rid of our bowl. I'm going to use the calipers again just to give me a rough size before we then start checking. So I'm just off camera, sorry guys, measuring the recess that I've turned here. And what I could do, which would be a little bit better, 2 seconds, what I could do is use the drill bit that we used to take the hole out. It's not that one. Use the drill bit. That would make things a lot easier to size with. Whilst I'm roughly checking, Craig is just going to find that drill bit for me. There we are, Craig. Whatever that one was, I can start roughly turning this down. And if I start, you can start with a parting tool, but I tend to start with a beading and parting tool because it's still square, but it's slightly bigger than the regular parting tool. So it gives us a slightly wider cut. There we are. So I'm going to roughly size it using the calipers. There we are. We're going to check that. So this is something that I do on chair legs and anything where I'm making a tenon to fit a certain size hole. Don't do the whole depth of tenon. If you do the whole depth of tenon and you've gone too far, there's no going back from that. If we just do this little bit and it's too small, we can just do the next step up again and make that the right size. So it's just little and often you've got to measure.
Perfect.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. There we are. Look, we've got the drill bit there, so I can size that with my calipers in a moment. Let's just check. Unless, yeah, we're nearly there actually. So I'll redo my calipers to that drill bit. Yes, Craig.
Question from Ben, and I think this is a pretty good question actually. He suffers from joint pain, has a heavy lathe, and even though it's bolted down, he's turning some winged vases. And after that, his hands are dead. He was looking at the soft grip handles. Would they help? Or any other tips on reducing kind of turning fatigue?
Turning fatigue, yeah. I'd like to know how long you're at the lathe for, you know, and how long you've been turning. Every now and again, let's say, for instance, let's say if I'm production turning, if I talk in my scenario, if I'm production turning, stood at the lathe for several hours doing the same motion over and over again, my wrists and right the way up to the elbow can start hurting. It's important to give yourself a little bit of a break, to have a stretch. And as silly as it sounds, literally have a stretch with your whole body, your neck, your back, and your arms. Make sure your lathe is at the right height for you, because when they come from the shop, from the factory, from wherever you bought the mail order, just because they have a stand doesn't mean to say they're the right size. We're all different heights. Now, the general rule is elbow height to center, but that doesn't mean to say that's right for everyone. Okay, we're all slightly different builds. I like to have my lathe slightly higher, for instance. Dust on shiny handles create a problem. Excuse me, because you have to grip them tighter. Your ability can cause an issue because, again, you have to grip the chisel tighter because you're not quite presenting in the right angles. So all of those things coupled together to give you joint pain. I've been giving some lessons recently on spindle turning to my wife, and she's quite nervous. So again, she's gripping onto the handles very, very tightly, and it's literally 10 minutes before her wrists, her elbows are aching. So it's that sort of thing. Yes. So horse leg tape is quite good because it's thin. It's like sort of injury tape that you can get. You wrap that around there. It's not very thick, so it doesn't create a very, very big handle. That's quite good. You can use tennis racket tape or bicycle grip tape, handlebar grip tape, but that's quite thick, so you need a thin handle before you start with that. I would go something like the horse leg wrap that you can get just to make it a little bit grippier for you. Yes, Craig.
And a question from Simon: what wood is most resistant to splitting when turning?
Oh, crikey! There's quite a few. I wouldn't say it, but if we can't go, you know, with one timber, say, oh, that's not going to split, you know, because they all will if they're given, if they're treated wrongly. So if you take a wet bit of timber, you turn it and then take it immediately into somewhere that's hot or warm, and then it's going to split regardless. How you treat it is probably more important to the timber. Saying that, you know, if you start turning things like eucalyptus, you're going to get movement and splits. Whatever you do, unless you turn it wafer thin, and then it'll just move and go crinkly like a bit of leather. But I would say use your standards. So in this country, things like ash, the oaks, the beeches, the sycamores, they're all quite good. They all move heavily. So I've got an example here of two rough turn bowls. So there's a beech bowl. Now you can see that one, the shape that it's gone. You can see the bow right in the center there. So that was able to move. If that was left solid, it would have split. But that's a bit of beech. It's moved dramatically and still been okay. This second one here, if I hold it the other way, so if I show you that, now look how oval that's moved. But again, it's retained its integrity. It hasn't split or anything because we've made it thin enough in the walls to move and carry the stress. They can now be returned round to a finished piece and all good. So that's a piece of ash. The previous one was a piece of beech, and they've worked quite well. Any exotic woods? No. So when I say exotic woods, of course, it depends on where you are in the world, of course. But very, very dense, slow-grown timbers are the ones that would cause you more problem than the quicker-grown ones. So yeah, stick with the basic ones you can get easier. Let's go back to getting that tenon formed. Time is shooting. We'll double check our tenon again. And the same, if you've gone too small, you can, which I have, but only by a little amount. I can now do the next bit slightly thicker in diameter. So by doing that small section first, you're not in fear or danger. Yes, Craig.
Aiden's asking, what's your favorite wood to turn?
Favorite wood to turn. There we are. We've got a nice fit there now. Favorite wood to turn. I quite like. So chestnut's one of my favorites, which a lot of people are surprised about. But I like the smell and the look of chestnut. Ash is quite nice. I've got this. I've been talking about this ash that I picked up recently, which is rippled. That's quite nice. Sycamore is a lovely one, especially if it's slightly damp as well. You get those lovely ribbons. So all of those sorts of timbers, really. I don't like dense, hard, heavy timbers, even though they might be beautifully coloured and all that sort of stuff. Padauk is a wonderful looking timber, but it's horrible to turn. It's dusty. It's very peppery, those sorts of things. Sycamore, ash, beech, chestnut, oak, all of those sorts of things are my favourite. Yes.
And a question from Hodgepodge. He says, obviously it varies across wood grains and bowls, but if you happen to get splitting in rough turn bowls, could this be a sign of too thicker walls or wall thickness not even?
Could be. I've never had a problem really with uneven wall thickness on rough turn bowls. Try and keep them, minimize the potential for splitting, but I've never found it a massive issue. It might just be down to the timber you're using. Fruit timbers, for instance, you'll probably get sort of 7 to 8 bowls out of 10 that you make that don't split. It might just be the slightest little thing and not in the wrong place. Maybe a split that you didn't see before it started drying. I mean, if there's any splits in there at all, when you start drying them, they will open up. So it could be that, maybe turned with the pith still in, those sorts of things. It's an unknown quantity a lot of the times, but certainly those sorts of timbers are more frequently splitting than the previous ones I mentioned, like sycamore and the ashes and chestnuts, oaks, all those sorts of things. Right, I've got another hole to turn, and I see the time is flying, so I'm going to rush through and answer questions as we're working. So I'm just going to measure the hole that I've created here, which is nothing to do with the drill size. I'm going to just crack on and cut this, probably undersized, but we'll see. Now you can, if you want to, measure the top section here to fit exactly in the recess that you've made here. That's entirely up to you. I'm not messing around with it. In fact, it needs to be quite a lot smaller. I wasn't going to mess around with it purely because of time, but that would give a much neater look. Let's get rid of some of this a minute. And once you've spent a bit of time getting the sizing right, that's nice. So that fits through there nicely. Once you've done that, once you've fitted, got the sizing right, then we can have the fun bit of playing around with the shape here, which we're about to do. But that's it. That's perfect. Don't forget, once I've done this here, then I can create the little holder on the top, which is going to be a little button, basically. In fact, let me just double check that. I want to make sure the bottom of this area here doesn't overspill into the little V cut that I've created. So we're going to take a little bit of diameter away from the bottom and do a nice little voluptuous shape. Yes, Craig.
Martin's suggested, how about silver birch?
Yeah, silver birch is lovely. Really nice to turn. If you get birch down by the root, you get some wonderful markings on it as well. Really, really pretty timber. There we are. That's small enough. So let's go shape. Let's go. So a nice, we'll go 1/4 inch bowl gouge. That's great.
A question from James. He's been practicing turning using bits and bobs of firewood and ended up with a few okay bowls, but he's having trouble identifying what the wood is. Any good tips or places to look for identifying wood?
There are lots of books out there. I have a bit of an issue with books, wood ID books, is they're great whilst they're new and they got lovely colour. Depends on which bit of wood was photographed to create the book, all those sorts of things. You may have already discovered that one piece of oak won't look the same as the next piece of oak. There's so many color changes and variations. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be that helpful. I'm going to say it's down very much to experience. Once you've seen enough pieces of oak, you've seen enough pieces of birch, sycamore, all those sorts of things, you start to see the little telltale signs, the flecks in the grain, the density when you pick it up, the color changes, all those sorts of things. That's certainly how I've learned over the years. But you're right, there is such a vast amount of timbers out there. We're never going to know all of them.
Colwin, one thing that I've found quite useful, I know a lot of people on social media, Facebook, if you join a wood turning Facebook group and take a little snapshot, a little image of the timber that you're trying to identify, believe me, you'll get a very quick response and some very helpful, good suggestions there.
It's good, isn't it? I mean, groups like that, they are so helpful. Everybody's so quick and wanting to help you. Really nice. Yes.
And Aidan's also asked, do you ever turn any wood and resin projects? Is it a thing worth trying?
Yes, I've done a few. I do plan on doing a couple of projects for you. In fact, one of the questions we had this week is, can you fill cracks and splits in timber with resin? So that is one that I've got down on the list to actually demonstrate for you. We're going to do that, but I've also got some great images of projects that we've done, river tables and bowls, in a mixture of resin and timber. It is worth trying. Again, the internet is fantastic for all of those sort of inspiration pictures. So just put wood and resin. There's makers out there that specialize in doing exactly that and only that, So I'm largely just using the bowl gouge to create a shape here. There we are. That'll do us for shape. You can sand. You can elaborate on that more. I've taken that a little bit too thin, unfortunately. I should have kept that double that thickness. I'm not going to sand, but let's see where we are with this so far. Now, what you could do, there we are. So there's our raised pedestal bowl so far. Just swap over to this one a sec, Jace. There we are. So that's the plug coming through. Now, that's nice and firm at the moment. What I want to do now is just create a little holder that slots onto that. It can all then be glued together, and you've got your little raised bowl for fruit, for nuts and things like that, whatever you want to use it for. So let's just quickly make that knob. I don't think I'm going to get to the other bowl, but we can do that in another session, and we can certainly talk about it though. Just create a little bit of space. So first of all, I'm going to hold that blank in a chuck, and I'm going to use the A+ jaws for that. Let's use this piece. This is a piece I got ready. It's a bit of ash from the same bit we used for the stem. Slightly better. Take your time with this. Put it between centers. Round it down first if you want to. Yes, Craig.
Martin's just suggested, would you consider staining that stem, perhaps?
Yeah. I mean, you can stain it. You can make it the same timber. You can make a contrasting timber. You can do all sorts with that. I mean, at the moment, on that particular raised pedestal bowl, we've got 3 different color timbers. Even though 2 of them are the same, the base and the stem is ash, they are a different piece. See where we are with that. Yeah, we're almost square. So now we'll just clean the foot up. I'm going to make a very quick hole for this to go into. I want to be as accurate as I can, but again, you know, I'm not going to spend too much time at the moment because of our time restrictions. So what I've done there, let's get this in shot for you. All I've done is, which one? Above? So look, all I've done, I've got a center hole there. So why not use my dividers to measure where that is, and then that can then be transferred to here, look, to create the hole. So it's quite nice. Yes, Craig.
Question from Aidan. He's a beginner turner, and he's struggling to find what sanding sealer and waxes to use. Do you have any suggestions for a beginner?
Sanding sealer, there's loads out there. Either go with an acrylic sanding sealer, a spirit-based sanding sealer, a cellulose sanding sealer. Follow the directions. Cellulose will dry quicker. Acrylic, it's water-based. Takes a little bit longer to dry, but it's water-based. Spirit tends to be like a shellac, so that's your sort of medium drying time. They all work really, really well. Follow the directions on the tins. And in terms of finishes, depends on your project. Friction polishes for small projects, waxes for larger ones. You can use oils very effectively on salad or fruit bowls. Just again, make sure if you're using them for fruit bowls that you're using something food safe. But yeah, we've done a few videos. If you look back at our archives on Woodworking Wisdom, I've done one specifically on finishes for turning. So have a look back through that one. I'm sure there'll be something in there that could help you out as well. This hole doesn't need to be too deep. That will do. So now I'll just true it up. Remember, with a square-faced tool, so I'm using the square skew. It's going to be far too big for the actual piece of turning. We're going to live with that. Let's just check the size before I take it off. Yeah, that's actually not too bad. That was more luck than judgment. Okay, we're going to swap jaws again. Just to save myself time, instead of swapping jaws, I'll swap chucks. And we're just going to make a little handle. Put the extractor on a minute. It's getting a little bit dusty. So this is a 3/8 bowl gouge. Don't forget you've got a hole in the middle. What shape should we do? We're going to keep that square. Just going to take that away from the chuck to reduce the size of the bottom of this little handle. Smaller gouge, so we'll go back with a little quarter. I'm very aware of where that bottom is, so yes, great.
Question from Frederick. Do you ever leave the room when turning for the glue? I have never done this. Is it a consideration you make? I ask as very thin glue makes a weak joint.
Not entirely sure what you mean by that one.
Yeah, Frederick, if you could just elaborate on the question a little bit. We're not quite sure what you mean there, my friend.
I'm trying to think whilst I'm working here as to what you mean by that one. You know, in terms of glues, I would, you know, bear in mind we're trying to get this done for you in this hour. If I was at home, I would use a wood glue and leave things overnight. Here we have to get things done fairly quickly, so that's why I've used the super glue. Normally, I would have used something like a TITEBOND. My preference is a PVA. And certainly with this sort of thing here, I'd want to use something decent like a PVA. So that is too big, that recess there. But bung a bit of glue in it. It'll be fine. But there we are. Now we've got a means of holding and lifting that around. We've plugged that up. Your alternative to doing that would be to make just a little recess and have a little button to go over the top if you didn't want to have a lifting knob, for instance. But there, if we can go straight on there, Jace. All right, so that's your raised pedestal bowl. We've got a little lifting button in the middle, and once all that glue is dry, we're going to answer a couple more questions. Whilst we're doing that, we're just going to look at the other. In fact, I'll leave that one out for the moment. I'm just going to look at the other one, which is dry now. Yes, Craig.
The question from Frederick, I'll read it again. I didn't quite read it right to you, so it's my mistake. Apologies, Frederick and all. Do you ever leave room for the glue? Not leave the room for glue. Go and get the glue. I didn't know. Sorry, guys. Yeah, over to Colwin.
Leave room for the glue. Yeah, I know where you're coming from with that one, actually. It's not something that I consider, because I tend to use PVA. The idea with a PVA is it expands. So it expands the fibers of the timber. So you've got to make sure you've got glue on the joints, obviously. And what you're saying is, if it's a really, really tight joint, you're not going to get glue on the joints. I get that. The only thing I can say is, when I'm making chair legs to fit a chair base, the joint that you make needs to be a good fit, not a tight fit. Good fit, the difference between the two is, if you're having to screech that chair leg into the hole and it's really tough and it's screeching and making all sorts of noises, that's too tight. It needs to go in firmly but easily. If you can do that, then yeah, that's probably perfect for a PVA anyway. I mean, if you wanted to go for something like a polyurethane that expands, probably less reason to leave quite, a looser fit. And be aware of polyurethane, though. You have to make sure your joint is clamped, otherwise it'll push the joint apart, so that can be an issue again. Look, let's just very quickly explain what the next procedure is with this and set it up. So that's our raised pedestal bowl. If I was now to carry on and finish this one to where we were producing one like this, where we've got a nice plug in the middle and we've got a nice base on the bottom. So what I would do now is go back to my chuck, and I would grip this, and maybe a little bit of turning, but pretty much sanding only there, because we've gone right the way up and level with the inside of the bowl. Once we've done that, we're going to then use our push plate. And again, for those that have never seen me use it, let me just demonstrate what I'm talking about. I'll just form the foot for this. So there's my push plate, bit of plywood on a faceplate ring, which I can then expand the chucks onto. We're going to use our tailstock. We're just going to swap centers. I'm going to go for a ring center over the Pro Drive. At the moment, look, we've got a little bit of a nib there. That needs to be knocked off. I'll just use, I've got a carving chisel here. I'm going to go off camera just for now. I'm using my bench to brace against while I just carve off that little area. I don't want to hold the bowl in my hand whilst I'm using a carving gouge. So there we are. I've just put a little center pip in here. That can now go against my push plate. And now we can do our little feature foot. Lathe speed to 0, turn the lathe on, then turn the speed up. Little 1/4 inch bowl gouge. Don't forget, you can go through the bottom of the bowl from the underside equally as easily as you can from the top. We'll stop and have a look. Let's just see. I want to look at this joint. Oh, that's actually, I surprised myself there. That's really nice and clean. Yes, Craig.
Yeah, question from Martin. What sort of speed are you on when using the push plate?
The push plate, that there, and that will differ a little bit with the size of bowl, but at the moment that's 900 revs on that piece there. Okay. There we are. So look, what we would do now, we would sand that. Take that off just to show you. So there we are. So look, we've got that nice little curve, a nice little feature foot. This little nib in the middle here. Again, you know, if you've seen me do this before, that would be a case of now mounting my little bowl sander in my chuck and then using the corner of that just to take that away. You could use a carving gouge to take the majority of it away if you wanted to before using the sander, or put that on a bench with some router massing and get your power drill and just use the power sanding head again just to take that little nib away, down through the grades to 400, then a little bit of hand sanding. All of this to be sanded on the lathe whilst running, of course, whilst between centers. But there, that hopefully that's given you a few ideas of how to overcome the issue of going through the bottom of your bowl. Okay, we've got a couple of little finished pieces, almost finished pieces there. And if you don't tell anybody, no one will know that it wasn't intentional. So I hope that's okay. All done with the questions for the minute. We're going to be back next week, of course. Jason's going to be doing some turning. I'm going to be moving out of the turning workshop and doing a little bit of bench work and making some little mini decorative surfboards. And Craig tomorrow has got a fantastic little project, pocket hole jig. I'm not going to give you a spoiler, but it's all about pocket hole jigs and something for the pet lovers out there. So until then, thank you very much for joining me. I've been Colwin. Thank you very much and see you next time. Bye-bye.